Hey guys, it's Hink here. So today we're going to be discussing a very common question about basically what is the best age to pursue PE. There's some very interesting science behind this. By the end of this video, I think I'm going to have you a pretty clear answer. So as background, guys, a lot of this is going to be contingent upon the anti-lysyl oxidase or lysyl oxidase activity. I have made 2 videos now. Please watch those so you can understand. I break down the material further, but basically lysyl oxidase is what's responsible for taking your collagen fibers, like the structure of your actual tunic of the penis, and actually like putting it in line and making like the strength of those fibers. There is like a rat study, which I'll pull up the study here and I'll show you the picture, but it basically showed that if you basically give a rat that anti-lysyl oxidase, that alone will increase the size of the rat's penis by 10% just with that. This is a key thing. Now the reasoning behind that is basically you inject the rat with it, it allows for the collagen to be more like malleable, and honestly just the nocturnal erections of the rat will cause the penis size to grow as a result of that increase in pressure from those erections. Now that we have that understanding that lysyl oxidase or the lack or anti-lysyl oxidase is what really is going to potentially enhance enlargement. Now that we have that settled, let's get into the debate when it comes to age. Part 1 is going to be like why it might be better to be an old cantankerous miser like myself when you're doing PE. There's actually been several animal studies like the one I'll put below that show that lysyl oxidase, that activity actually decreases with age, meaning the older you get, the less activity you have, meaning potentially the more malleable the tissue of the tunica is to potentially lead to more gains. Here is this rat pumping study that I put below, and you can see actually along these graphs is you can see that the actual lysyl oxidase activity. So this is looking at like basically 8, 12, 16, 24, and 48 weeks because rat lives are not measured on the same like spectrum as like human lives. Like a year in a rat is like way longer than it is in a human as far as like development and aging. You can see that as these rats get older and older and older, you can actually detect that their lysyl oxidase activity is decreasing. And ultimately, that's what you want. And here's actually a paper in elderly patients looking at lysyl oxidase activity, and it shows that basically as you get older and older, you have less lysyl oxidase activity, and you can actually have some like vasculogenic problems that occur as a result of this decreased activity. On the one hand, it's like, oh, yay, we might have like decreased lysyl oxidase activity, so maybe you'd grow even faster if you were like 60. Well, you know, conversely, when you're older, guys, there's a lot of problems that can occur. Number 1, the tissue is less resilient, so you're going to be more prone to injury. Usually when, especially older guys, I'd say, honestly, starting in the 30s now, men can actually start to develop erectile dysfunction, okay? Like the rates of erectile dysfunction are shockingly high, largely due to the obesity epidemic and things like drugs, alcohol, tobacco, and honestly just not taking care of yourself and the diet choices like diabetes and high blood pressure. There's developing of like atherosclerosis, which is leading to decreased penile blood flow, and hypertension. Having high blood pressure literally damage the smooth muscle cells of the endothelium of the penis. So that in itself is going to lead to damage to the penis. Not only that, but there's actually evidence that your penis starts to shrink the older you get. Why is that? Well, basically, as your testosterone decreases, you have decreased nocturnal erections. Nocturnal erections are honestly key as far as getting that blood flow to the penis, expanding that tissue, maintaining the tissue that you have, and keeping your tissue healthy. So when these men are aging, and they're not taking amazing supplements like our Vitality that I specifically made to boost your testosterone based on real science. I have a whole video explaining it, available now on Leviathan Subs. Then they're going to have basically decreased testosterone, decreased penile health. There's also evidence that testosterone supports your nervous tissue. So like especially DHT is important for the actual nerve conduction of the actual penis. If you have decreased decreased DHT, then you actually have decreased functioning and actually nerve conduction in your penis. Then of course you can have things that affect older men like prostate cancer or even BPH, benign prostate hypertrophy, which can affect actual penile function as well because of the nerves that are involved in that area. You also have less elastin and you have higher rates of fibrosis. That's just what can happen, especially if you don't take care of yourself. So all of this can make PE more risky. So older guys, how can you counter this? Well guys, just doing like the stuff you're supposed to do. Exercise, you need to get cardio activity in there. Some people like to quibble with me on this, but you need at least 150 minutes per week of zone 2 cardio is all, there's no reason to overcomplicate things. That's all you need to do. Diet, avoiding diets high in fat, high in sodium that can increase your high blood pressure. Avoiding problems like hypertension and diabetes type 2. And then of course, supplements, guys, like I know you think I'm no, I won't say you think. Guys, no, I get overwhelming love from you guys. And unfortunately, I perseverate on the few douchebags that like to give me crap in the comments. But so I'm gonna do better with that. That's whatever, my 2024 resolution. Well, we need to actually like break down younger, because there's actually like two different types of younger. There's younger, which is like less than 40, and there's younger, which is like during puberty, like somewhere between that like 12 to 18 type of range. I would never recommend PE to like anybody of any kind of a legal age. By legal age, I mean like below the age of 18. There is some very interesting data that I do want to talk about. Basically what we have is this anti-lysyl oxidase study here, where they combine the anti-lysyl oxidase with pumping at actually different pressures, which we'll talk about in just a second, but they used different age groups of rats. And they basically wanted to really focus in when rats actually undergo puberty, which is around 4 to 8 weeks. Because they hypothesized that, hey, when these rats are already maturing and they're already having the most penile like growth and development, if we can supplement that with anti-lysyl oxidase and on top of that, we can pump, they could have monumental gains is what they kind of hypothesized. And lo and behold, what they found is that these rats that were basically undergoing puberty, using a vacuum device and exposed to anti-lysyl oxidase, that led to dramatic rates of increased growth, especially in that 4 to 8 week time period, which you can see here in these graphs. If you look at like the actual like slope of the graph, you can see it's much steeper between 4 to 8 weeks, where it kind of tapers off before 4 weeks and after 10 weeks. This is actually indicative that theoretically, if you were to engage in any of these like PE during actual puberty, that could accelerate gains. So another point that I want to, sometimes I can be like a petty douchebag, but in this study, so first of all, they showed that there was a much higher rate. So if you were in puberty, pumped, and you had anti-locks, it was almost 20% increase in size, whereas if you just have your general adult rat, it was only a 17.7% increase in size. So, that is a significant difference, but it's actually, it's not like it doubled, it was just a little bit better. So regardless of your age, this stuff is gonna work for you. Now the pettiness comes in because when it comes to pumping, I've said it before, you need to use higher pressures. And some people like to quibble with me, but here's an example of what I'm talking about. It says for pubertal rats, 200 millimeters of mercury plus anti-locks lengthened the penis by 14%, while 300 millimeters of mercury and anti-locks increased it by 19.8%, suggesting that a higher mechanical force resulted in longer lengthening. So 300 millimeters of mercury is essentially 12 inches of mercury, or as we like to incorrectly refer to it on Getting Bigger as just HG. That is what I've been saying, guys. You need to pump to a higher pressure. It is more dangerous, but here is further data showing that you need to pump to a higher pressure. 12 is pushing it, guys, and I don't recommend you start off there. You need to basically start off and gradually work your way up. But if you want to get permanent gains, then you need to pump at a higher pressure. And that's also, I think, why some of these like older guys like to be like, oh, pumping doesn't work, but all you need to do is clamp. Listen to me because I'm an OG and I know what I'm talking about. With no science to back it up. So basically, takeaways, guys, from this study, it shows that most remodeling in men's penises, just in general, from puberty are between 12 to 16 years old. So in theory, at least in this animal model, using some kind of PE during that time frame would lead to potentially the most gains. I would never recommend that, guys. There are people who seriously injure themselves, and even things like discoloration. It's like you don't know what you're doing when you're 12 or 16 years old. There's so much that could go wrong. That's why I would never recommend this, guys. But, if somebody was, I don't know, maybe like 18 and still potentially growing and like at least have some like cognitive development and they're technically an adult, it's more of a consideration at that point. Though personally, I still think that it makes more sense to like wait to see like what your actual final size is going to be once you stop growing, and then only then, if you're not satisfied, then consider doing something like PE, okay? Rather than just kind of rolling the dice from the jump. So what are some other good things with just being young in general? Well, the opposite of what I said for the old guys. You're more resilient, better blood flow, faster recovery, and you typically have higher hormone levels. Nocturnal erections for recovery are going to be higher, and you don't don't necessarily need something like a PDE5 inhibitor like Viagra or Cialis when you can just use something like a citrulline-based product. We are back in stock, guys. Use the link below in the description if you're interested. And speaking of, so what are my conclusions? Guys, there's pros and cons to either. It's not, if you're my age and you're in your 40s and I'm like, oh, it works best in your 20s, and like, how does that help you? Okay, like your age is what your age is. I would never recommend starting too early, though the data is pretty interesting that, there's some evidence that, hey, when there's the most remodeling will occur, if you know what I mean. But I think that's far too risky. I'd never recommend that. And I do think if you're in your 20s, that's kind of where your lysyl oxidase activity is, arguably at your like highest, and it might be a little bit harder to gain in this time period, like quite frankly, because it's after puberty, but before like you age and your lysyl oxidase levels decrease. So it's something to think about. But I hope you guys learned something and had fun. I sure had fun. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace and love, guys.